Welcome to another edition of 4 and 4. I'm Kathy Halgren, Director of South St. Paul Public Library, and this quarter I'm featuring a book with three wives, a novel based in Minnesota, a tale about three friends from college, and a police procedural in North Dakota. In my first book, Adrian is told by his 10-year-old daughter Pearl that he's a love addict. At least that's what her mom says. Lisa Jewell's novel, The Third Wife, explores the dynamics of blended families and the perceptions of those that cause the rift and those that are left to pick up the pieces. Adrian is in his late 40s, but he's on his third wife, much younger Maya, who has just been killed by a bus after a night of drinking. This drinking binge is totally out of character for Maya, and Adrian is stunned. But as time goes on, we learn that Adrian has a habit of glossing over everything, believing that leaving his first two wives really wasn't a big deal. After all, everyone gets along, right? But then his son Luke, from his first marriage, discovers hidden away on a computer a file of bullying emails to Maya, and everyone starts to get a little nervous. Was it an accident, or did Maya commit suicide? And then mysterious Jane enters the picture. What on earth does she want? This author has been compared to Leanne Moriarty and Jojo Moyes, and I agree. A fun read about families, feelings, and flirting. Lars Thorvald left Duluth, Minnesota for the Twin Cities to escape lutefisk and to find opportunities for romance and his culinary skills in Kitchens of the Great Midwest by J. Ryan Stradal. This novel was recently number 19 on the New York Times bestseller list, which isn't bad for a regional title. It's an unusual combination of Minnesota tradition and our Midwestern can-do mentality, with tall Scandinavians, Lutherans, and regional cooking thrown in for good measure. Our story begins with Lars married to Cynthia, and they've just had a baby girl, Evie. Both Lars and Cynthia work at the same ethnic restaurant, and then an evil West Coast sommelier decides to take Cynthia away from Minnesota and her life as mother and wife. If I tell you what happens next, I will ruin the book for you, but just let me say that the writing's quite good, and if you're from Minnesota, you can't help but laugh and nod in acknowledgement as you read about this character and that as they struggle through life in the great Midwest. And it's always fun to read about places you've actually visited, especially around the Twin Cities. Recipes provided. I discovered my next book, How to Start a Fire by Lisa Lutz of the Spellman Mysteries, through a patron who commented while returning the book, "Well, I've never read anything like that before." I accepted the challenge and I loved the book. It focuses on three women who meet at college in California, and you learn how their lives have unfolded over 15 years or so in a haphazard fashion. George is a knockout, great at sports, hoping to become a forester, but ending up in multiple marriages with multiple kids. Kate has dreams of taking over her grandfather's diner, but he has bigger plans for his smart, no-nonsense granddaughter. And then there's irrepressible Anna, who stumbles through life, trying to escape her privileged but emotionally cold upbringing, and amazingly becomes a doctor. I have not spoiled this story for you at all. There's so much more. I hope you'll give it a try. If you haven't tumbled to the C.J. Box craze yet, maybe his latest, Badlands, might be a good introduction. North Dakota is the backdrop for the story, specifically a fictional town called Grimstad, modeled after Williston. After reading this, I'm glad we just passed through that area on our way home from the Rockies. There are two main storylines surrounding Cassie Jewell, one concerning a trucker who's a serial killer, and the other having to do with her new job. She has just accepted a position with the Grimstad Police Department, but she had no idea what she was getting into. The winter is brutal, and her boss, Sheriff Kirkbride, thinks he's got a dirty cop in his ranks. With the oil boom in his formerly sleepy town, there's money to be made. Undesirable elements have moved in, including the notorious gang MS-13, and when a huge supply of drugs and cash go missing, Cassie is on the case, hoping to catch the real culprits before they all freeze solid. Finally, if you love The Paris Wife by Paula McLain, just wanted to mention that her latest, Circling the Sun, is out, and it's a fictional account of the life of the great aviator Burl Markham. And that's all for this edition of 4 and 4. I'll be taking a bit of a hiatus in the hopes that I'll be able to start writing my novel. In the meantime, if there are great titles you've read, I'd love to hear about them. Just leave a comment for me.